Thank you. So, this time I will be talking about the link between deceitful behaviors of politicians and how it affects political trust, or how the British citizens' behavior is affected by the level of political trust. This is a paper in preparation together with co-authors Laura, Louise, and also Janette. We're still working on this, but it's also a presentation of data from our ActEU survey and a conjoint experiment that was included there. So a little bit of background in the literature on corruption and its impact on democracy. It's sometimes authors talk about this proverb about the fish rotting from the head down. And what it means is that when politicians act in a deceitful manner, this can affect levels of political trust. So it will have a negative impact on political trust. But at the same time, we also see in elections, not only in the US, but of course, especially in the US, that deceitful politicians are not punished in elections. They are re-elected and can continue with their dirty deeds. And this is sort of the problem that we try to examine in this experiment or in this paper. So what we are asking is, do people accept deceitful behaviors from politicians? Also, what kind of acts may they be willing to accept? We also examine differences among countries by looking at whether countries that are believed to be more or have more problems with corruption are also more accepting of corrupt behavior, as might be a natural idea. And then we also examined what kinds of people are more accepting. So we examined differences of acceptance across level of political trust and also ideological congruence. So whether the politician and the respondent in this case, or citizens, are of the same ideological belief. Does this make people more willing to accept deceitful behaviors? And the same with issue congruence. Here we look at whether the position on climate change policies make people more willing to accept deceitful behaviors. Right. And as I said, we do this with a conjoint experiment that was embedded in the ActEU survey where we collected data. And this conjoint experiment includes a lot of treatments. And for our purposes, it is most important that it makes it possible to examine the impact or the causal effect of 3 types of deceitful behavior: lying in a press conference, abusing powers to favor family members, so nepotism, and then corruption in the form of taking bribes. How do these affect how people feel about politicians, and are there differences between these forms of deceitful behavior? Then, as I said, we're also able to examine differences across countries to see whether there are differences in effects depending on the level of corruption in the country, and also individual level differences we can examine with the help of this conjoint experiment. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about what a conjoint experiment is. We were told not to include too much technical details. I will still say something about why this is a good method for examining our research questions. So conjoint experiments is basically a technique or a method for measuring causal effects of several dimensions or causal treatments. And we are actually able to assess the effects of these treatments, even though people are assessing several treatments, making a multi-dimensional choice. Like, for example, when you decide who to vote for, each candidate has a lot of characteristics, and we are able to determine which one are the more important ones. Also, we have three outcome measures. We have choice, so whether a profile is selected or not, so whether a politician is selected or not. But we also have what we call rating scale measures, so how much respondents tend to like a politician based on these treatments, and how well they feel that this politician represents them. And basically, we estimate two measures to understand our results. So we have this AMCE, which is basically the causal effect of the attributes on the likelihood of selecting the profile, or the effect on the profile rating. And then the marginal mean, which is the likelihood that a profile with the likelihood that a profile will be selected, or the average rating of the profile. So this is just important to be aware of when understanding the results that I will get to now. So first of all, we here see the results of or the impact of all of these treatments in the conjoined experiments on the three outcome measures. And what we see quite clearly is that all of the deceitful behaviors, so lying, abusing powers, and taking bribes, have strong negative effects on all three outcome measures. So this is, of course, good. I mean, it seems like all these deceitful behaviors have negative effects, and also, as might be expected, the stronger forms of deceitful behaviors, so abusing powers to favor families and taking bribes, has stronger effects compared to lying in a press conference, which we may see. It's more or less what we expect from politicians. Also, if we quickly look at the effects of the other treatments in this conjoined experiment, we can see that deceitful behavior has clearly the strongest effects. It's basically only the ethnicity of the profile, and perhaps also political leanings, that have similarly strong effects. So this deceitful behavior is really important. But when we look at differences across countries, and depending on the level of corruption, there are some interesting differences. At the top, we have the choice outcome measure, and here we see that there's not really any differences between countries with lower corruption and countries with higher corruption. But when we look at the two other outcome measures, we see that there is a tendency for the effects, so the AMCs, to be stronger in countries with higher corruption. So it actually seems like deceitful behavior matters more in countries where there is higher levels of corruption. And this sort of contradicts our expectations. And it also means that there is a risk of these countries experiencing increasing legitimacy problems, since if there are higher levels of corruption, it means that people also react more and more strongly to these deceitful acts. So these countries can potentially experience a vicious circle. When we look at differences across individual levels of trust, we see that, and here I only use the choice measure, I should say, so this is a bit simpler. But actually, again, we see that the effect of deceitful behaviors is stronger among those who have low levels of trust. They are less likely to select deceitful profiles and more likely to prefer profiles that are conforming to basic norms, so basically just presenting a political proposal. And this is perhaps a problem, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, because it could suggest that corruption, deceitful behaviors, is a more or a less pertinent issue for those with high levels of trust. So it seems like they seem to care less about these problems with deceitful behaviors. Then finally, differences across ideological and issue congruence. So whether the politician and the respondent has the same position ideologically and on climate change. And here we see that ideological agreement means that people are much more willing to accept deceitful behaviors. So this is both to the left and to the right, I should say, that people tend to, they may not like it, but they're willing to accept it as long as we know that we have the same ideological beliefs. We see a similar pattern when it comes to issue congruence, but this is mainly found for pro-climate attitudes. So it seems like those who are in favor of introducing stronger measures to combat climate change are also willing to accept corruption to get what they want. So it seems like people are at least sometimes willing to overlook politicians behaving badly if they get what they want. So, conclusions. The good news is, of course, that it seems like deceitful behaviors generally have strong negative effects. People don't like it when politicians misbehave. But there's also some bad news from this. So people in countries with higher levels of corruption, they are more likely to care about these issues. And it also means that there's a risk of ever-increasing levels of political legitimacy. We can also say that it seems like critical citizens matter, since people with high levels of trust seem to care less about corruption. It's not that they don't care at all, but it's not a pertinent issue for them. And then finally, ideological congruence and issue congruence means that people tolerate deceitful behaviors if they think they can get the policies that they want.